Hello, I'm Philip Mugglestone, and in this series of videos we're covering the SAP HANA Application Function Modeler. In this video we're going to look at authorizations in order to use the Application Function Modeler. Now the AFM is actually part of the AFL or Application Function Library, but it's also integrated very tightly with the Extended Application Services or XS, which is our core SAP HANA development environment. So we're going to need to bring in different authorizations from both sides in order to work with the application function modeler. The first thing we should do is create a user, so a specific user. So I'm going to go to users, I'm going to create a new user, and I'm going to call this the AFM user. And it would be the system user, which is how I'm currently logged in as, that would do this. We can set an initial password. And now we need to grant a number of roles and privileges. The first thing is we need to grant the role to this user of, and if we search on AFL, this one called AFL BFL execute for the business function library, and also AFL PAL execute, which is actually the predictive one. But it's a good tactic to do PAL and BFL at the same time, because we're going to work with both of those potentially using the application function modeler. So we need to create or basically grant those two roles to our AFM user. What we also need to do is grant some specific object privileges. And we're going to go to the object privileges here, and we're going to look for something. If we search on repo, what we can see is something called repository underscore rest with sys. We need to provide execute rights to this user. So this basically is to do with the XS services. It allows this user to work with the repository, which is where all content, including our models, is actually going to be stored. So we create that one. And the final one, we need to give some package privileges to allow this user to create new applications using the developer perspective. And to do that, what we need to do is go and look for, if we search on root, we find the repo underscore package underscore root. We need to set that one up, and we do repo read and then edit, activate and maintain for native objects. So those are the requirements that are the authorizations that we need to give to our user so that they can use the application function modeler. So let's save that user. So the user's been created and we can see him now in our list of users. Now, normally with HANA, the default is that the first time you log into the system, you need to change your password. So what I'm going to do is, pointing to the same HANA server, I'm going to add an additional user. And I'm going to now put in our AFM user with the initial password. And now, when we log in, it's going to prompt us to change that password. And it's much better to just come in and log in and do it here than to actually try and manage that further down the line. So we're going to now change to a more secure password. So we've changed our password. So that was something that the HANA system, you can turn that off in HANA, but by default it's turned on. So that may save you some time when you're working with this. So now, having created that user, we need to start looking at the actual development environment, so how we work. And to do that, you use a different perspective from the classic admin or modeling console. You use a perspective that's called the SAP HANA development perspective. So let's open that. And what we can see, we've got a space on the left for our projects. We've also got we've actually got the catalog, which we were looking at before as the third area, and we've got here an area for workspaces. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of how you set up and work with XS or Extended Application Services. If you've run the Open SAP training, if you've been through that process, the training for developers, then you'll be more than familiar with this whole setup. So what I'm going to do is simply, as my AFM user, I'm going to create a workspace on my client machine. So we can call this the workspace belonging to the AFM user, which we now created, and it now links in, and we can actually see some different packages, the standard ones that come with HANA, that are on the server. And that now means that we can create our own projects and actually have them stored centrally on the HANA server, because the HANA Studio is actually using a proper mechanism for multi-user parallel development. So that's why we're seeing some of this. So the next thing we would do is create a project. So that's very easy. We just right mouse button, then new project. And the type of project would need to be a HANA Development XS, Extended Application Services project. And we can give it a name. So I'm going to call this one, as we're going to work with the PAL within the AFM, I'm going to call it afm.pal. Okay, so there's my new project. And by default, the project's not really got anything in it, it's empty. But the next thing, and this is quite important, is I need to now make a connection with this project which is local on my desktop with the HANA server, which is connected through this workspace. We need to effectively see our project listed here. So to do that, I go into the project, right mouse button, and down to Team, Share Project, because it's a new project, and I can now, using this repository workspace that we just defined, I'm basically making my connection between my client and my HANA repository, and I click Finish, and now we'll see it's changed. Now it recognizes that it's working with our HANA server, and it actually now connects with the library that's on that server. We can see our users, or we can see our schemas, for example. So we've now created that. Now, in fact, we're now very close to being able to start working with the application function modeler. And the way we work with it is through this project environment. What we in fact will do is to add a new, and then we would choose Other. And in this list of SAP HANA development, you'll see that we have something called an AFL connector file. And this effectively is the application function modeler user interface. So if we click Next on that, and we give it a name, so we might give it a name of K-means, click Finish, it automatically adds a file suffix and creates us this thing called K-means AFL PMML. And if we double click on it, we can then see that we have the application function modeler on the screen. And importantly, we can see, let's just minimize that to make space. We can see on the right hand side we have a list of functions that are available to us in this interactive modeling environment. So we can see for the predictive analysis library we have the k-means, we have other functions available. We can see we've got classification and decision trees. We can see we've got a priori and a light priori, or a priori light for associations. So we've got the key predictive algorithms, and we can also see we've got similar functions for the business function library, the BFL. So actually you can work with the BFL and the PAL, the predictive analysis library, using the application function modeler. So we're now ready to go. So what we're going to do in the next video is actually build up. We'll look at a k-means example, and we'll carry on from this point, and we'll actually build up a working k-means example.